Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Twilight of the Coyote by Ron Schwab, narrated by J. Rodney Turner. Chapter 1. Kate. Kathleen Rose Connolly dismounted, plucked her binoculars from the saddlebags, and left her Appaloosa gelding in the shade of a solitary ponderosa pine that resided at the top of the granite bluff. She did not worry that Warpaint would wander beyond the sound of her whistle. They had been together 10 years now, since the gelding was a foal, and she was 10 years old. Kate had been sitting on a pile of straw in the corner of a stall at the foal's birth. She had named him for the 3 white streaks that extended like Sioux war paint from beneath the eyes down each side of his face, giving him a fierce look, she thought. Other than its namesake markings and some generous white splotches on its rump, the horse was coal-black. She sat down on her favorite bench rock and brushed back the silky strands of copper-colored hair from her green-tinted brown eyes and looked out over the lush valley, as she had countless times over her young lifetime. She felt a cold, wet nose against her cheek and reflexively put her arm about the thick shoulders of Galahad, her black Labrador retriever, and pulled him close. He had been her friend and companion for only a few years less than Warpaint, and was an early descendant of a breed finding its way to America from Newfoundland, by way of England. His name had been inspired by her obsessive reading of Lord Tennyson's Idylls of the King, 12 narrative poems retelling the legend of King Arthur and his knights. Galahad was known for his gallantry and pure heart, and the traits it called to her as a young girl, and still did in her dream world. As far as Kate was concerned, she was more than halfway to heaven in this special place she had never shared with another human. It was her first trip to the top of the bluff since spring break. It was late June 1927. And the sun's warming rays more than offset the stiff, cool breeze that whipped the uplands this morning. She scanned the steep, craggy slopes of South Dakota's Black Hills National Forest across the valley to the west, but she was perched on Connolly Shamrock Ranch land. Just barely. As she looked out over the valley, she could not shake off the quarrel she had with her father, Owen Connolly, at breakfast. His Irish temper had flared when she announced she would not be returning to the South Dakota State College of Agriculture and Mechanical Arts in Brookings, where he believed she was enrolled in a home economics curriculum and diligently seeking a rancher husband. She had been an honor student at the college, but, unbeknownst to her father, she had enrolled in an agricultural program and was on track to graduate with the class of 1928 in another year. She would earn a Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture with an emphasis in beef production if she finished. She had not really lied to her father. He had just told her what to do and assumed she had done it, and rarely showed any interest after that. She intended to ranch, with or without her father, and while she had a healthy interest in the opposite sex, her destiny was not to be some man's brood cow. A husband would be nothing but a nuisance right now. She already owned 50 Angus cows out of the Shamrock's 500-cow herd, and she would cut hers out and lease her own place, and start fresh and free of his pig-headed notions of where a woman's place was, if it came to that. She would find another job to subsidize her ranching until it could stand on its own. She was paying for her own education and could do what she darned well pleased. She would tell her father tonight what she had been up to, and what she planned to do. She pressed the binoculars to her eyes, and as they roamed the creek on the valley floor, she caught sight of a fisherman attired in hip-length waders and a fancy fishing vest, casting for trout in the fast-flowing stream that sliced through the Shamrock's 10,000 acres of pasture, hay, and row-crop ground and half-naked hills. The fisherman's hat was perched evenly on his head, and as serious fishermen tended to be, he appeared oblivious to anything but his quest. She pegged him as a dude, probably an Easterner. He was also a trespasser. She would ride down and let him know he was on private property, and then she would give him permission to fish there. Visitors to the hills frequently wandered innocently onto Shamrock Range, the ranch being tucked between the Pine Ridge Sioux reservation lands to the east and Black Hills National Forest to the west and north. She was curious. The fisherman didn't appear to have a horse. How did he get to the remote fishing spot? He was miles from any lodging or campground that she knew about. She turned her binoculars northward along the rocky Park Service road that snaked into the hills and formed a rough boundary line between government and private lands. She paused when she saw the Model T Ford parked on the roadside midway up the steep hillside. The road was a path to nowhere, carved from the granite slope and dead-ended a few miles further up. It was rarely traveled, except by forest rangers and maintenance personnel, or the occasional hiker or lost tourist. The nose of the automobile pointed downhill, so it had already been to the dead-end turnaround. What she found strange, however, was that there was a stocky man dressed in a white shirt and tie and suspenders leaning against the vehicle, his hat pulled down over his forehead in a losing effort to ward off the sun's glare. She swore she could make out a shoulder holster and pistol hitched on the left side of the man's torso, an outfit like she had viewed on screen at a Lon Chaney movie. Mobsters sometimes carried their guns that way in films, but so did plainclothes lawmen. Was she watching a gangster of some kind? Or a good guy? Either way, he must be the source of the fisherman's transportation. A swirl of dust moving up the service road caught her attention. Another Model T. Not surprising, since more than half the automobiles in the country were the economical Ford that sold for less than $300. The vehicle rolled to a stop, nudging the front bumper of the other Ford and pushing it back a foot or so. Mr. Suspenders had strolled toward the oncoming car, with one hand raised in an apparent effort to halt its course. And now he was totally exposed when two men with pistols aimed leaped out of the car. The armed driver quickly joined them. In the middle of the road, 3 guns faced one. Mr. Suspenders dropped his weapon, and the driver walked over to the man and slammed the butt of his pistol into the side of Suspenders' head. He fell like a burlap bag of corn onto the road. The newcomers engaged in animated conversation for several minutes, evidently plotting the next step of whatever they were doing. Finally, the driver and one of the men dragged the felled man off the road and rolled him over the edge, where he slid 20 feet or so down the steep hillside until coming to a stop in a cluster of chokecherry and skunk brush. She could not determine if he was alive or dead. One of the men retrieved rifles from their car, and with the driver remaining behind, the other 2 started down the deer trail that led into the valley below, and ultimately to the stream. They were obviously stalking the fisherman. It would be a simple matter for her to take a back trail and reach the fisherman before the stalkers arrived. But what was the point? The fisherman was a stranger, and for all she knew, they could be lawmen tracking a wanted criminal. It seemed unlikely, however, that such persons would have struck a man down and tossed him off the roadside. Would they have not taken him into custody and escorted him to the back seat of their Model T? Of course, the fisherman could still be a gangster. Maybe the Chicago mobsters were bringing their wars to the Black Hills. She decided it wouldn't harm anything to take a closer look at the occupant of the trout stream. She could decide what to do about him after she had a chance to size him up. She whistled for war paint, and in a matter of moments, Kate and her companions were headed down the serpentine trail that took them back to the foothills. Less than a half hour later, She dismounted, pulled her Winchester from its saddle holster, and abandoned the Appaloosa. Followed by Galahad, she inched her way through the aspen, birch, and scrub oak that lined the stream. When she reached the clearing where she had sighted the fisherman, she found him standing in the knee-high water that broke swiftly around his legs as it followed its course downstream. His back was to her, but if he turned, he would certainly see her at the edge of the clearing. He was a slender man, a few inches shy of 6 feet, she guessed. She saw no sign of a stringer full of trout, and she thought he seemed a bit inept at tossing the fly, almost as if he was not very serious about catching a trout. "Good morning, young lady." She started when she heard the man's voice. He turned toward her and began slogging toward the stream bank, the rapid waters pulling at his feet. When he stepped upon the rocky bank, he tendered a close-lipped smile and cocked his head, obviously waiting for her to speak. "I thought you should know, mister, that you're trespassing on private property." He looked genuinely surprised. "Good heavens, I had no idea. I was informed this was parkland. This is very embarrassing. I'll pick up my things and move out of here. My auto and driver are on the road up that way." He pointed northwest, where Kate had viewed the altercation. "No, that's all right. Folks are welcome to fish here if they respect the property. That road separates the Black Hills National Forest from Shamrock Ranch land. I just thought you should know." She smiled. He seemed to be a soft-spoken man in his mid to late 50s, and she did not find him the least threatening. "I do want to know," he said. "I have the utmost respect for private property, and with your permission, of course, I would like to return to this little clearing. It's very peaceful here. I have a car and driver waiting for me on the road, however, and I really must be going. I am expected at the lodge for a late lunch." He peeled his rubber waders down his thighs and sat down to work them off his feet. When Kate saw him struggling clumsily to get free, she leaned her rifle against a tree stump and stepped over and knelt and helped tug the encumbrances from his feet. He stood and started a futile effort to brush the wrinkles from his trousers, which seemed a bit too nice for an outdoor expedition. "You haven't done much trout fishing, have you?" Kate asked. "First time. My wife said I should take a guide, but I wanted some time alone. I'm a pole and catfish man by heritage." "Well, I'd be glad to teach you a few things about angling for trout, but time's wasting. Are you a crook or anything like that?" "I've been called a crook and a lot worse, but no, I don't think of myself as a crook." "Well, forget about going back to your car." She told him about the run-in she had witnessed. His face turned somber, but she saw no panic there. His brow furrowed, and then he said, "I hope Harvey isn't badly injured or worse." "I truly can't say. They didn't shoot him. I suppose they were afraid that would alert you. I guess I'd better be on my way, and you had better go too. I thank you sincerely for the warning." "And where do you think you're going?" "I will stay with the stream. It will eventually take me to civilization of some kind. In a dozen miles, maybe. There's a cave in the rocks no more than a quarter mile from here. We'll go there. Even if they find us, I could hold them off for hours with my Winchester. If I don't get back home by lunchtime, Grandma will make Dad and Stretch come looking for me. I will be missed also. I put my life in your hands, young lady." "Kate. Call me Kate." "You may call me Uncle Cal." Chapter 2. Kate. Uncle Cal seemed like an odd bird, but he was nothing if not a perfect gentleman. He didn't say much, but Kate could sense that a deep intelligence lay behind those translucent blue eyes. Wheels were turning in that head. They had taken shelter in a deep cave with an entrance that made a tight squeeze for Uncle Cal to inch through. The opening would be difficult to see from the creek bed that lay some 30 feet below, She had never explored the depths of the cave. There were many in the Black Hills, and its tunnels might traverse for miles, connecting with countless openings in the region. She was a bit claustrophobic, and she was determined they would make their stand, if necessary, near the entrance. Uncle Kyle sat leaning against the wall on the opposite side of the cave, just inside the opening. Galahad snuggled against him while his new friend stroked his head and scratched his ears. The dog slightly annoyed her with the instant rapport he had formed with the stranger. It meant nothing as far as the man's character was concerned. Galahad would make friends with an axe murderer, so long as the axe was not directed at Kate. "Kate," Uncle Cal said, "if you will allow me to take your rifle, I will keep an eye out for the men. I grew up on a farm in Vermont. I am a respectable marksman, or used to be." She was not about to surrender her Winchester to a stranger. She still carried doubts about her judgment in interjecting herself into this situation. This man seemed pleasant enough, and for that matter, he had a familiar look. But she might have seen his image on a wanted poster at the post office. "Sorry, I'm hanging on to the rifle. It's not a decoration for my saddle. I can use it." She could make out enough of Uncle Cal's face in the beams of sunlight admitted by the cave's opening to see that it registered some surprise at her response. But he remained silent. She scooted closer to the entrance and peered out. They had arrived. The two men hurried along the stream banks, one on each side. She worried they would stumble onto war paint. The gelding would be grazing a short distance downstream. Of course, the two men would never catch him, but they might scare the horse off, in which case it would probably head for the home place. "They're here," she said in a near whisper. "One's an Indian, probably Lakota, braided hair, which you don't see so much these days. A chunky, older guy. The other looks like a dandy, shirt and tie, fancy shoes, and a fedora hat. Kind of dressed up for an outing out here. A little on the skinny side. Olive skin and sort of oily looking. Dad would call him a wop. Could these folks be friends of yours? Your descriptions tell me nothing, but I don't suppose I would be acquainted with anyone who might be stalking me. An Indian and Italian seem a strange combination for such a task. You're not a gangster or anything, are you? The Italians are mixed up in the mobs, according to the newspapers." "No, I'm not a gangster. I suppose I had better come clean, as they say. I'm the president." "Of what?" "The United States. And I'm Queen Victoria." She heard the pursuers' voices and cautiously looked out of the cave's entrance. "The scrawny guy has spotted the cave, and he's at the bottom of the slope." She positioned her Winchester against her shoulder and poked the barrel out of the cave opening, holding her fire until she was certain the man was going to approach the cave. She had him lined up in her rifle sights, but she had never fired at a man before, and she did not know for certain he meant her or Uncle Cal harm. No, she could not shoot him down without warning. She waited patiently. The Italian-looking man called to the Indian. "George, get your ass over here. I think there's a cave up this hill, and it looks like fresh scuff marks on the dirt." The Indian splashed across the stream, stumbling and falling to his knees when he clambered up the bank. He got back up and moved on like a clumsy bear, she thought. He bent over to catch his breath when he reached his companion. The Italian said, "Up there." He pointed to where Uncle Cal and she were hiding. "You need to climb up there and check it out." "Why me?" "You are the Indian. It's your job to sneak up on people." "Go to hell. Do it yourself." The stalkers did not seem to be over-endowed with courage. She questioned just how persistent they would be. She aimed carefully and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. the echo in the cave stinging her ears as her bullet tore through the Italian's fedora. She placed 3 more shots at their feet, kicking up rocks and gravel. The Indian was already backtracking as fast as his stubby legs would carry him. His partner raced after him 10 paces back, but gaining ground. The men displayed no inclination to regroup and continue their assault, but she decided they should wait a spell. She did not want to surrender the little fortress until she was certain they were in the clear. Besides, she needed to figure out what to do with her companion. She felt she had taken on responsibility for this man, even though she was not certain he knew his onions. "They're gone?" Uncle Cal asked. "It appears so. I don't think they'll be back, but we should wait a spell to be certain. Then I need to get home. I guess you'll have to ride with me." She looked at him dubiously. "Have you ever been on a horse?" "Yes. Not often in recent years, but as I said, I'm a farm boy. I used to ride bareback." "That's good, because you'll have to ride behind me." "Oh my." "What?" "I'm not sure that's very seemly." This guy was trying her patience. "I guess if you can handle the reins, you can have the front seat." "I think I would be more comfortable with that." "Now, I think we'd better get better acquainted. I am Kate Connolly. My father is Owen Connolly. He's a rancher and owns this place. It's called the Shamrock Ranch. I'm a college student at South Dakota State, home for the summer and maybe for good if I have my way." "Very well. I was quite certain you were not Queen Victoria, since she is long deceased. I was born John Calvin Coolidge. My late father bore the same name, and he was a farmer, justice of the peace and jack of all trades at Plymouth Notch, Vermont. I am currently employed as president, and am spending my summer at the State Game Lodge in South Dakota. Alas, I will not have my way, and I will be returning to Washington at summer's conclusion." It struck her then. The fisherman was not demented. He was the president. She had read that President Coolidge would be spending the summer in the Black Hills, and that he and his entourage would be taking over the State Game Lodge. Oh my God. I don't know what to say. I had no idea. I feel like such a fool. I'm sorry, Mr. President. The president chuckled. "Please, Kate, let me be Uncle Cal, at least in private. You likely saved my life today. My Secret Service protection was somehow taken out. The man you saw assaulted was Harvey Woods. Agent Stiles was posted at the road entrance. I fear for his well-being. Edmund is going to be outraged over this breakdown, if he does not first suffer a heart attack when he learns I'm missing. Edmund? Edmund Starling. He's head of the Secret Service detail that came with me to South Dakota. A serious man who does his job very proficiently, but he does not take it well when life does not follow his script, as it rarely does for any of us. Well, I think our best bet is still to ride to the Shamrock home place. There is a telephone there, and we can contact the State Game Lodge and let somebody know where you're at. I'll warn you, though, we're on a party line, and half the county will know where you're at before the day's out. I know Grandma Beth will be thrilled to have you at the house. She voted for you, I'm sure. I'm worried about Dad, though." "What do you mean?" "I don't know what he'll think about me dragging home a Republican." She smiled at the thought. "Your father's a Democrat, I take it?" "Yes. He says every good Irishman has a D stamped on his butt at birth. Pardon my French." "Well, when I was elected governor of Massachusetts, I ran very well in Boston's Irish precincts. I dare say there were a few good Irishmen who did not get stamped." I look forward to meeting your father, and promise not to talk politics. Chapter 3. Trey. The First Lady entered the room in the state game lodge that had been set aside for budget work. When she appeared, I was hunched over the table with my tin-crank adding machine, trying to make sense of the budget for the Department of Agriculture. I stood immediately. This was not my job, but I was sort of a guest of President and Mrs. Coolidge during my assignment in South Dakota, and could not refuse the President's request to help with budget matters during time I was not otherwise occupied. Grace Coolidge was a ritzy lady in her late 40s, and looked a decade younger. I had something of a crush on her, and I could not understand what enamored her so with her husband. She was cheerful and vivacious. The press called him Silent Cal, a moniker well earned, and I had never heard him cut loose with a good old belly laugh. It was a challenge to draw out a smile. That's not to say he was without a sense of humor. In fact, he had the quickest, driest wit I had ever encountered, and he often had a twinkle in his eye. But he had a knack for confounding both friend and detractor. The President is late. We were to have lunch at 1 o'clock. Perhaps the fishing is good. But one of the agents should have reported in. Edmund is not pleased. I would never say it out loud, but Edmund Starling, the Secret Service agent in charge, was never pleased. I think his undershorts were too snug and pinched his privates. Well, I'm certain Edmund has everything under control, and the President will be here shortly. Mrs. Coolidge pushed aside a chair across the table from me and sat down without giving me time to assist. Sit down, Trey. I would like to chat. I complied. Yes, ma'am. I invited your grandparents to join us for the Independence Day celebrations. July 4 is also the President's 55th birthday, you know. I imagine he is really looking forward to the occasion. You know better, Trey. He'd rather go fishing or read, or work on the budget. But he will not. I have planned several days of Black Hills experiences. I suspect my grandparents will have to decline the invitation. Gramps is getting up in years. He's a few years short of 80 and looks it. Gramps Sky's 6 or 7 years younger, but you'd never guess she is past 70. I have good news. They've already accepted. You forget they visited the White House in March. They both were fit as a pair of fiddles. You are just seeing your grandfather from a young man's perspective. This could not be happening to me. You don't seem excited about the news. Well, I do have an assignment here, and I don't know that I can take off to spend much time with them. And Gramps and I have something of a testy relationship these days. I cannot imagine why. You are such an easygoing young man. Calvin loves to spend time with the senator, and I adore Sky. You must take time to patch up any differences with your grandfather. She stood. We'll talk again. Perhaps you can tell me what kinds of activities your grandparents might enjoy. She flew out of the room like a lovely butterfly, carrying my heart with her. I was grateful for her exit, however. I did not wish to be the one to tell her Gramps would rather spend his time fishing with the President. Everybody might be happier if the First Lady and Graham Sky took on the social schedule together and left their spouses at the state game lodge. The unwary husbands, of course, had no choice but to surrender. I ended up with the presidential party on this journey indirectly because of political connections. My full name is Ethan James Ramsey III, hence Trey. My father was Deuce Ramsey. Gramps must have still had a sense of humor when he tagged Dad with that nickname. Major Ethan James Ramsey II was an infantry officer killed in action by the Krauts. He's buried in France. Gramps and Graham, accompanied by my mother Zoe, crossed the Atlantic and visited his grave 5 years back. I declined to make the trip.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?